Now I'm very excited to welcome for the first time Mr. Parker Fleming from Sumer Sports and the Bet US College Football Show to the Oddsbreakers. You can follow him on Twitter at StatsOWar. Parker, been a big fan of yours for a long time. It was great meeting you a couple weeks ago in Vegas. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. That was a really fun event to get out there for sign-up weekend and everything, and network and meet people. And I appreciate that. It was great to meet you. And we sent a selfie to our mutual friend Kyle Hunter. So kind of nice to make those connections. Yeah.
Selfie at the pool. I hope it made him jealous. Although it is summer where he's at, so there's always a difference. But man, what a college football week one! I mean, lots of things happened. I enjoyed it very much. How would you just describe this first week of college football that passed us?
I mean, I think the first word that comes to mind is explosive. You watch a game like TCU and Colorado, and you see a ton of points and not a lot of defense. It felt like it was the 2007 Big 12 all over again. And, coupled with Colorado and Texas State, I think interesting, showing that there is a possible reversal of fortune in college football. If you get aggressive and smart in the transfer portal, you can really make some differences and make some changes. So that was the big thing for me. And I think we learned a lot in week one about some teams where there's high uncertainty. I don't know if it's true for you, but I felt going into this college football season, I felt less certain of my numbers than I have in years, just because the new reality of the transfer portal makes things so different for how teams can be year to year.
Well, you just hit it right on the head there. It was massive uncertainty. I totally agree with you. And it even kind of pushed my research back a little bit more in college football. Then I used to do that first, then NFL, but I had to switch it this year because I knew more about NFL. I knew after the draft, I knew, free agency signings. I just had to kind of get ahead of those season win totals before. And I was a bit late on college football, but I wasn't really regretting it because look at the massive differences. I would call college football week one just fun. I mean, yeah. It was so fun. It starts out, well, at least the Saturday starts out with Deion Sanders upsetting TCU after all the people talking bad about them. And it's so funny to talk about the adjustment for the power ratings because we know not to overreact. But my argument is we didn't even know where to start this team, So yes, you have to do something drastic like. But we'll get into that game coming up, man. But it was just so electric because you have LSU beating or losing to Florida State. And Florida State was the dog, and it felt like they had more fans there in Florida. There at Camping World Stadium. That's what I felt like. And then, of course, the Clemson-Duke game, where people are almost penciled Clemson in to win, and Duke's like, Mike Elko, and just taking care of business there and making them look foolish. It was just amazing college football, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of fun. And I love that they've done so well with the Labor Day weekend where you get the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday games too. Very, very nice.
Oh, I think the networks did a great job with the NCAA and in scheduling those games. I totally agree with you. But why don't you tell us and our listeners that might be new to you a little bit about you and a little bit about Sumer Sports? How does it bring value to the marketplace?
Yeah, so I've been with Sumer Sports since last November. So coming up on 8 months, I believe, 10 months. I can do math, I promise. So almost a year, not quite a year, but yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. So it's outside of entirely the realm of, gaming and gambling and betting. What we're doing over there is building tools for teams and for fans and for consumers to understand the game of football better, have access to stats, have access to resources that help, make decisions and again, be better consumers of the game, but also specifically teams to help them maximize their roster value and make those personnel decisions that are so important over the long time horizon of building and maintaining an NFL team. So a ton of smart people that I work with. I'm primarily working to create tools and projections and metrics that'll be public facing. So we have a new website, sumersports.com. If you get up there, we've got some stats on it. It's a little bit of a placeholder we're building out, but soon and all throughout the season, we'll be rolling out metrics and all sorts of fun stuff for the NFL, which is cool because I've been a college football guy for so long and I'm getting to, do some of the stats and data for the NFL, which is a lot of fun as well. So really, really, really great group of folks, really smart group of people over there and building something really, really cool. And a lot of that will be public facing as well.
Oh, nice. So it's going to have all of football, right? Not just college football. It's going to have NFL and all the advanced stats and metrics that we can enjoy on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, starting with NFL for now, and we're working on building out some college tools as well. That's obviously where my passion lies. But yeah, and the designers made it look awesome there. And so we've got some articles, and then we've got some stats and some visualizations for you up there. Just to we've simulated the NFL season a couple times. We've looked at how players are usage. There's a whole page about personnel and usage and adjusted yards per route run. So lots of fun stuff there.
No, totally. What's the zone here? I click on the zone.
The zone is the articles and podcasts specifically. So we'll absolutely plug them. We have a lineup of 3 podcasts this fall. One of them is our kind of flagship show, the Super Sports Show. That has Eric Eager, formerly of PFF, Dr. Eric Eager, and Thomas Dimitrov, who is the GM for the Falcons for a long time. They are talking about the NFL, and that is some of the deepest football content that I think is on the internet. It's pretty great. Must listen to. They're going 2 times a week. And then on Tuesdays, we'll have a Stats and Scheme podcast that is Sean Syed, our director of communications, who does really great with scheme, and then Tej Seth, my colleague, who does a bunch of data stuff. They'll be talking about the NFL. And then on Thursdays, we'll have my podcast called Odd Man Front, which will be my first ever NFL podcast, where I'll kind of talk about how to think about the game and looking through metrics and everything, kind of doing recaps and previews. So a lot of fun stuff over there on the Sumer Sports website, and those will all be on our YouTube channels and everything as well.
Oh, looks kind of cool, man. Look at this. You got the league table here. You have a strength of schedule before and a strength of schedule after. I kind of like that. I like that idea. I like breaking it up, because before we don't know, and then after you can kind of figure out where this team a little bit worse or better. I see that all the time, where the projected strength schedules aren't really where they finish, but it should be something kind of evolving throughout the season. So I love that. Division title percentage, playoff percentage, total wins predicted, the bye week, bye percentage. No, this is all great stuff. I'm sure some of that's going to be covered as well on that podcast. So I'm excited to get into that, but this kind of leads me to your site a little bit. CFB graphs. It's CFB actually dash graphs, and I've been using it for a while now, since you incepted it, but I enjoy some of the EPA stats on that. Could you explain to our listeners what EPA is and how you use it as a predicting model for sports success?
Yeah, well, one full disclaimer, I'm a little bit behind. A lot going on right now. And as soon as we're done on this podcast, my objective tonight is to get CFB graphs turned over for the 2023 season. But so these are 2022 stats. But EPA is a really good metric that is descriptive. It looks back and kind of helps us understand what happened for a team. And the elevator pitch is really simple. It answers the question it answers the problem that 3 yards on 1st and 10 is bad, but 3 yards on 3rd and 3 is good, right? EPA converts yards to points in context, helps us understand the value of a play. It's success and explosiveness, efficiency and explosiveness in one metric, almost like an on-base percentage, right? Not just how often are you you're a weighted on-base percentage, not just how often are you getting on base, but what's the value of those on-base plays. So just a nice way to look at it. You're right, just a WOBA, yeah.
Oh, that's great. And so basically it kind of shows where teams might be a little bit undervalued due to some bad turnover luck, or possibly something happened in the red zone. Maybe their field goal kicker isn't up to speed. Maybe when you take a look at these, you can kind of pick off some teams that have a high PA or high EPA, right? Rather than, and maybe a poor record or something similar.
Yeah. I think if you scroll down a little bit on there, you can see teams like a Toledo that has notoriously bad special teams. I don't even know where they are, but they have a relatively higher EPA, per play, and they're 7-5, and they're 36 in EPA per play. Again, that's descriptive. That's just it's like net yards per play or something. It's not predictive there per se, but they're 38th, right? They move the ball pretty well on offense and defense. The special teams is really killing them. That's what's really hurting them. And so you can identify some of these guys, for gambling perspective or even watching perspective, who aren't as good at the down-to-down business of moving the football, or who are better at the down-to-down business of moving the football, but special teams is kind of making a difference one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sample size is everything too. So don't feel too down on yourself. That's only been week 1 and you still don't have this stuff up, because I tell people that's just like looking at yards per play right now against the fact that Notre Dame played 2 cupcakes. It's like, it's those situations. It's like, I can't use these stats just yet, but there's going to be a point to use these stats. But that actually leads me into my next question that I kind of talked to you a little bit about when we were in Vegas, man. I talked about a potential strength of schedule adjustment, maybe being added to your EPA numbers. Now, strength schedule is never perfect, but at least kind of tells you something that, hey, they played some cupcakes. This isn't their true power of blowing away bad teams by 40 points. Is that something that can be applied to your EPA numbers or other stats, or should it be applied as well?
Yeah. So, well, it depends, right? I think a lot of people want to see a stat and they want it to be predictive, and they want to say if they have X and they have Y, X minus Y equals Z. That's the difference between these two teams, right? And the thing about college football is there's a ton of stylistic heterogeneity, and by that I just mean teams are doing a lot of different things. Not only one team from the other team, but on a week-to-week basis, teams are doing a lot of different things to try to maximize and optimize given constraints. So very, very noisy data. In terms of opponent adjustments, I favor a couple things. So one, if we're just that, what I've chosen to do this year, because just so many people ask and it's so annoying to me, is I've made my opponent adjusted EPA per play. That's the one I'm going with. That's what I'm putting on the stat previews. That's one that'll be on the website here. And basically what it does is just say, here's the entire universe of college football. Let's make some connections based on conference association. And let's just say, how well did you do? Basically, it's effectively relative to the rest of how everyone else did against this team, right? And kind of adjusts based on that. So that right there is, it does tend to remove some of these outliers. It does pull a lot of the G5 teams way down. And so that, I mean, that helps in terms of those. It's not perfect. You'll still get, like last year, Marshall, JMU, teams that just absolutely dominated on defense for a good part of their season. They're going to be higher up in that metric because it's just hard to, argue that they didn't play super, super well, even if that's not predictive. So that public facing adjustment, I think, just kind of smooths some of the outliers, scratches the itch for people, makes it make a little more sense. I'm of the opinion that I don't really need to hold someone's hand and say, hey, Alabama would probably beat James Madison, even if James Madison's EPA per play is a little higher, right? Like we know that's going to be different, but there are people who want it, fans want to compare things on Twitter and looking for edges and all that. So I do a little bit of opponent adjustment for my metric that predicts scores and everything. I do a slight opponent adjustment that's different, and I adjust for rushing and passing selection. And so teams rush and pass a little bit differently. And we know certain elements of college football are a little more predictive. We know that, for instance, passing and being successful in passing on first and second down is a lot more predictive than getting a lot of third and fourth down conversions in a game. So if you win a game by passing a bunch on early downs, I'm going to say, hey, you're a pretty good offense. I think that's going to translate. If you win a game by rushing on late downs against a bad team, I'm going to say that's not going to translate as well. You probably can't do that. Alabama can line up and run over New Mexico State. That doesn't mean that Alabama can line up and run over Georgia, right? So we've got to account for kind of the fact that you are rushing says something about your passing ability as well.
Well, that's very interesting. And you said there's a predictor, a score predictor that you're adding to this site.
I put them in my stat previews that are on Twitter, and those go out every week. Yeah. Again, I'm a one-man shop and a little behind the eight ball here. Ideally, those will be on the website as well. Timelines TBD.
Oh, no, totally. I just want to know what to expect for it. So, and you said you're going to have an opponent adjusted segment as well. Is that going to also be on your Twitter then?
Yeah, I'm going to throw away the raw. I'm not going to put the raw up there. I'm going to put the opponent adjusted up there.
Oh, on this site.
Yeah,
okay, great.
On CFB graphs, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And then you probably put a little disclaimer on it. No, that's great. And sometimes it's important to know that. And there's different functions that kind of live and grow as each game's play. Every strength of schedule changes after each game. So that kind of I suppose learning type of algorithm is necessary these days when it comes to having good, actually accurate models. So that's great stuff, Parker. Thank you for answering all those questions, man. But I'm excited to get into kind college football and all this fun stuff that we like to get into. Now, the problem is, Parker, it's fun. I was thinking, I was like, man, maybe I should have Parker on it when we had some better data points, but what the hell? We still got stuff from last year and we still have games to talk about. I certainly might be knocking on your door again, but you kind of come into it when we actually have a little bit of a sample size to go by. And I think this stuff's very important right now. It's very power ratings based for me. Kind of where we start and, try to find little efficiencies within the metrics of the run and the pass and where teams, might not be able to stop the other team at all. But why don't we get into some games then? We'll start with Texas State versus UTSA. And on our Betfred ad screen, UTSA is minus 13 and a half. That thing's growing. I wrote 12 and a half when I was doing this morning, as you can see. Total is 66.5. So, now, this is a game that I very much did consider, Parker. And this is when it was 63 and a half. And I talked to Kyle a little bit about it too. I'm like, hey, what's your number? We were both like closer to 66. But unfortunately, I didn't get to it. And actually, it's not unfortunate in a way because there's a few reasons why I didn't get to it. It's, a small difference, 63.5, 66, 2.5 points. It's when you get to those, bigger higher totals, you want a little bit more juice than that. If it was a 44, then 2.5 points is great, but it's certainly the variance adds up as the total adds up. So Texas State, for one, is in a letdown spot, Parker. And I know it's early and you're not supposed to really talk about letdowns as much, but hey, they beat Baylor. They beat a big team. They beat a in-state rivalry type team that's supposed to be better than them in the Big 12. And they definitely changed a lot of things. They will play fast, but I'm not sure if they're going to bounce back from this. UTSA comes off a loss, and they outperformed Houston in the box score, at least from a yards per play position. They got more yards per play, and they only allowed 4.6 to Houston. Houston just won the game. They lost on turnovers, which is the most probably prominent misleading final score is usually the turnovers. That's where it all really starts. But I think that UTSA's defense did improve. They held them to 17 points, even with some of the bad turnovers. So this could translate into this game. And I think UTSA could shut them down. I was going to think more to the side when this was sitting at 11 and a half, 12 and a half. It's getting up to 13 and a half. My number's 14 and a half, though. So I'm going to give you a lean on Texas State at minus 13 and a half. What are your thoughts on this?
A lean on UTSA at minus 13 and a half, correct?
I'm sorry. Yeah, man.
No,
UTSA.
you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I was going to say I agree, but I want to make sure. Yeah. No, I think that's smart. One, again, this in college football, it's always frustrating to we do the show on Tuesday, Wednesday, and by Tuesday, the lines are already starting cooked. I think I read this offseason Logic of Sports Betting, the book, and he said betting on Tuesday is akin to saying everyone else smart has already made their choices, but I can make the smarter choice. So a little bit, watching those lines move, you're like, dang it. One thing that stood out to me, worst game of Frank Harris's career last week, and they still could have won against Houston. Three just staring down interceptions, looked way off, and they still, could have gotten the ball back at that spot at the end and still been able to win. One thing that I'm looking for with this, I don't think that Baylor has the offense or a dude like Quintez Cephas. He's 45.2% target share. They just went to him and were like, let's go. Texas State, Ford Dement and Eaton got cooked last week. They gave up 13.6 and 14.8 yards per on 17 passes from Baylor. So I think UTSA bounced back, absolutely able to extend this Texas State defense. And I think they'll score, but I think that, the UTSA secondary is a little bit more experienced than we think. They didn't play poorly last week against Houston at all. A lot of that was on the offense. So I like that one a lot. 13 gets a little big, but I would be inclined towards a lean towards UTSA there too.
Yeah, for sure. And so it looks like we're both on the same page. It's just so close here. And it's also really early. Mm-hmm. I also need a little bit of a bigger difference in my power ratings here sometimes when I'm looking at these games as well. Well, let's move on to the next game then. We have a lean to UTSA at the 13. Let's go to Illinois versus Kansas. Kansas is about -3, a little bit of juice on that. And the total is 45. Why don't you take this one away?
Yeah, I'm interested in this Illinois-Kansas game specifically because Jalen Daniels didn't play last week and he's coming back. And I think Kansas's ability to just to make explosives happen out of thin air is really, really interesting. Illinois forced 12 contested targets last week against Toledo, a game they barely escaped, and allowed 7 completions on that. Kansas only three contested targets last week, and it was Missouri State. It doesn't matter, but I'm saying they want to get guys open. They want to scheme open. They want to make you choose, hey, are you going to run up and try to defend Jalen Daniels and let him pass it over you, or are you going to sit back and let him get some yards on the ground? And so I'm pretty interested in Kansas's explosiveness, especially with Jalen Daniels coming back. Skinner for KU, 21.4 target share, 19.3 yards per reception last week. Super efficient. He's emerging kind of as their main dude, can go get the ball. And I'm really, really interested in the run game. Last week, Kansas, 6.2 yards per carry, 3.21 yards after carry. Illinois allowed to Toledo 5.2 yards per carry and 2.92, and with 4 runs of 10 plus yards. Kansas' explosiveness here, I think, tips the needle. Illinois' defense, we expected them to backslide a little bit without Walters, without those NFL dudes. And who among us wouldn't backslide losing DC like Ryan Walters and a couple NFL dudes? But I like Kansas in this spot with Jalen Daniels returning. Big game for the preseason Big 12 offensive first team all-conference quarterback Jalen Daniels.
Oh my God, 100%. I'm so excited for Jalen Daniels to come back. I thought he was going to play this game, but he never did. So that was this last game, but it shouldn't matter because they didn't play that much tough competition. And Bean was really good. I mean, that was fine. You did a fine job there, man. It's so funny because Illinois, I thought that was the more exciting later game. I mean, you had UCLA or USC was blowing their team out. UCLA had a good handle of Coastal Carolina, but this was a close game. So I was actually watching Illinois Toledo last week, man, and I thought it was an exciting end. But both of these teams, you can't get much from this Southwest Missouri State game. You don't know. No. And I'm still worried about Kansas's defense. Now, don't get me wrong. I was all over Kansas's win total last year. I loved him. I loved the coach, Lance Leopold. He used to coach at UW Whitewater. I was going to school in Madison. He obviously went to Buffalo, and that was great. I'm a big fan of his. So my power ratings, unfortunately, have a 2.75 number, and this is at the 3. I don't trust it as much because, like you said, I think the explosive plays lean Kansas, and I just kind of see Kansas on that upward trajectory. I think that Illinois did lose a lot. Luke Altmaier last week against Toledo was just okay, and he had the crowd behind him during the comeback and everything, and Toledo fumbled the ball. It was just, he looked competent at the end of the game, but there's nothing that blew me away. I think that Illinois' crutch is probably playing a guy like Jalen Daniels. So I'm going to strong lean to Kansas at -3 with you. I think that makes sense. What's this total at now? Is it still 45 or is it? That's pretty low if it was. No, sorry, I wrote it down wrong. 58. Yeah, I was like looking at it. I was like, why did I write 45? No, this total is probably a little bit closer because it's like what wins over Illinois' defense or Kansas's offense, right? If it's Kansas's offense and Illinois can't be stopped either, it's 58. But here's the thing: Illinois doesn't want to play Kansas's game, Parker. They want to keep it slow. So you're going to see a little bit of a pace war, I think, in this game, which is very interesting. But it's a wonderful game. I'm going to hopefully have it on one of my TVs and watch it when it happens. But let's get into another game. And this game, I bet on every year, I feel, because it's just always a dog +3 or more. Iowa versus Iowa State. Iowa State is +4. The total is a Kyle Hunter special at 36.5, man. It is so low, but you're not going to see a lot of offense here. I think this kind of would put in your whole like passing offense on first and second down. Well, the stats don't like Iowa so much in this, That's what I think about them. And I think these two coaches, Campbell and obviously Ferentz, they know each other so well. These guys have been playing against each other for a long time. Neither team impressed me that much, Parker. Neither did. Iowa might have been worse even at 4.12 yards per play against Utah State than Northern Iowa was against Iowa State, and I almost think that Iowa State overperformed Iowa if you look at kind of both in a pane of glass. But the low total always makes dogs look a lot better too. 36.5. This thing's still at 4. I don't know why it's still at 4. I think this should be coming down by game time. The last 5 matchups, Parker, the dog has covered 4 of them. Okay. So it's just this situation. Like last year, Iowa's the dog at 4. I took Iowa and they won an outright. It's just, I'm always going to play this game this way. I think this is too close of a game to have anything past the 3. My power rankings only have this about a 1-point spread for Iowa in Ames. Ames is a tough place to play. I'm taking Iowa State +4. It's going to be a larger play for me at 3 stars, Parker.
Nice. I like it. I like the logic behind it. I don't know what Iowa's doing. Like, is it possible that Kirk Ferentz sees this contract about 25 points per game and says, "You can't tell me what to do. I don't care"? Like, you thought they would have scored more last year.
They need a point.
I don't know that they can expect any different behavior. Yeah, this game always comes down to a punt return or something dumb. One thing that I'm looking at that I'm interested in, Iowa State. So I'm pretty familiar with the Big 12. That's where I really live. And Iowa State I thought was due for a little bit of a bounce back with Hunter Deckers at quarterback, and it looks like that's not going to happen. So I'm interested in kind of what they're putting out there on offense, knowing that there's a huge hole. And again, just looking last week, I think people thought they looked good, but I don't know. They've started slow in FCS openers 4 or 5 years in a row now. This is the first time they didn't. What they really did was just kind of run over a team, but not super convincingly. Cartavius Norton for Iowa State, 4.5 yards per attempt, 3.73 of those on average were after contact. But he only had a long of 17. So it's not like that's inflated by some, one big pop-off explosive run. It just means he was getting chunk yardages because the first person couldn't tackle him because it was an FCS school. I don't know if that's sustainable against Iowa. My number has this more like Iowa 4.5. I don't want to touch it, but for exactly the logic that you put out there, because it makes me nervous. This game's always weird, comes down to a special teams thing. So I can totally understand the logic of under and of taking the dog in this game, because that's just how it seems to go. You know what they say about rivalry games too. You got to throw the numbers out the window, right? And this is definitely a case of it. So I totally am vibing with what you're saying, but maybe I'm just a coward. I don't want to touch this one.
Yeah. I mean, most rivalry games will throw the numbers out the window. There's been a few exceptions in the past, but especially for a while, Ohio State, Michigan, but then that obviously just flipped 2 years ago. So that was one that the numbers didn't matter either. But let's talk about another game that you picked, and this is going to be a real exciting game. It's Texas A&M versus Miami, and Miami looks like they're about a 4.5 home dog. The total on this game is 51. I'll let you get started on this one, Parker.
Yeah, so a little bit in my favor here. I loved how Texas A&M moved the ball last week. Wegman was great, 81.8 adjusted completion percentage, and again, FCS school. But what's the big question about Texas A&M this year? Are they going to be able to simplify Jimbo's offense and make his playbook from this big to this big? And it looks like Petrino's doing that. A quarterback can digest it a little bit more and helping him out there. So as Jimbo, insofar as Jimbo Fisher is embracing the CEO role and delegating some of that day-to-day stuff to Bobby Petrino, I think they can move the ball really, really well. Evan Stewart is trouble, man. 4.42 yards per route run. That's just like a productivity metric, right? Of like how frequently you were involved and how productive you were. 4 is God tier in college football. It's like, you're amazing. And he is just very productive when he's on the field. The thing that worries me about Miami is being able to pace up. I think they made a good hire at defensive coordinator, gave them a positive bump there. I think they're due for some regression. On offense last year, maybe some positive regression. Tyler Van Dyke was fine, but when they had to play Garcia, man, Garcia's pressure to sack ratio was almost 2.5 times larger than Tyler Van Dyke's. Like, same amount of pressure, they just could not handle it. And I think that kind of underwhelms casts some aspersions over the rest of their season. With Van Dyke healthy, I think they're a different team, but I don't love their weapons. George and Restrepo are like a nice 1-2 punch. I just don't know they have enough mix to keep up with Texas A&M scoring here. So if this was an A&M, I'd be very, very, very strong on Texas A&M. But given that it's on the road, I'm going to be a little more cautious about it, but still strongly lean towards A&M here.
Man, I think we called this the disappointment bowl last year when they played, because both teams were just disgustingly disappointing. And it's so funny that how bad Miami finished last year. It was bad. It was just pathetic. But the way they finished last year, and the fact that I have to make an adjustment in my power ratings, they were one of the bigger adjustments up, because I had them so low last year, Parker. I think the team kind of gave up almost in a way last year. Van Dyke was out and everything, like you mentioned. both teams, but you can say the same thing about Jimbo Fisher, man. He was terrible at the end of the year. His expectations were even close to being met. I think he had one big upset last year. He always gets that one upset. I can't remember. Was it Bama? They won again. It was someone like that.
They won an Arkansas game where they were down 2 scores, I think. And KJ Jefferson stuck the ball out at the goal line to go up.
Yeah.
Maybe it was to go up 2 scores, and he fumbled it, and they ran it back, and then they came back and won. So there was a game that they had no business winning that they just got back in. And so I think that was the one that I had circled as like, oh, I can't believe they won this game.
I was on Arkansas that game, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's why I remember it.
We remember the losses and not the wins so much. Okay. They beat LSU on November 26th. That's what they did. Yeah, number 16 USA. But they did keep with Bama 20-24 last year when Bama was going through some issues. But still was a loss, of course. But yeah, they're just a weird team. They constantly underachieve. But I will say that Miami has recruited pretty well the last few years. Do they keep their guys? I don't know. A little. They've been keeping a decent amount of them. They've lost some. But the problem is, I have them not so far from each other. So I'm not at 4.5. I'm at, my power rings are at 2, so it's kind of like, but it's also a game where my confidence level is low. I think my confidence level on Iowa State is way higher than my confidence level on this, right? It's almost like the Bears versus the Packers this week. I'm even a Bears fan. I have no idea what I'm going to get out of these two teams. Yeah. I really have no idea. So I have a low confidence on it, which would mean I need a really big difference in my power rings to make a play. But I'll have a little disagreement with you. I'll just lean Miami just based on my power ratings, but it's hard for me to trust that, Parker. So we'll see how it's gonna be an exciting game to find out a little bit about these teams though next week. So I'm pumped for it.
For sure.
Let's move on to another game that you picked: Notre Dame versus NC State. NC State plus 7.5. The total is 51. I actually did play this game. I'll let you go first and see if we line up, Parker.
I am of the opinion that UConn kind of punked NC State's front seven last week. 170 rushing yards, 3.0 yards after contact. Audric Estime for Notre Dame is not going to go down that easily. I think that their rushing ability for Notre Dame a lot better than last year behind this offensive line. Sam Hartman, even if I didn't love some aspects of his play in the Navy game, I think gives them so much more on the top end on offense that really frees them up to have a high rushing floor with Estime and then be able to challenge you vertically. Given that NC State was struggling a little bit with UConn, I especially defensively, I'm inclined to believe Notre Dame's going to put up some points here. On the NC State side, Brennan Armstrong wasn't hitting deep balls last week, and that's kind of what you brought him in to do. Of his 155 yards, 40.6 came on passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. Their leading receiver was the running back, which is not what you want in a kind of tune-up. We're playing a G5 game here. So I think that there's going to be a learning curve for Armstrong and Anai to get the groove back together there for offense. I like Notre Dame's upside here. I'm going to ride with the Irish on the road.
You are riding the Irish. Oh, brutal, because I did take NC State, but I took them for a certain reason. I actually liked what Brennan Armstrong did with his legs. I upgraded UConn and NC State from that game. I thought UConn looked good too. So it was just one of those rare upgrade both teams kind of from what you saw. Now I could be completely freaking wrong. I mean, at least I'm on the right side because at least UConn went from +5 to +3, and this went from +9 to +7.5. So it's kind of like the market. It looks like both of these separate games. UConn's playing, I forgot, Louisiana, I believe, someone like that. And then so it looks like both of them kind of got a boost from the market, at least from the opening numbers. A couple things that nuggets I pulled out since 2016. Dave Duran is 7-6 against the spread as a home dog. I think that's interesting. Sam Hartman looked awesome, and he deserves some of the Heisman talk he's getting, but who did he play, man? And this Navy team starts out terrible every single year. They played absolutely nobody last week. I think that could possibly hurt them on the road a little bit. I think Brennan Armstrong with his legs was just an interesting little, I guess, maybe possible way they can backdoor this thing, if they're in a bad position. Now, I'm not in love with the play. It wasn't a big play of mine. I took it at 9. I gave it out for free at 7.5. It's still at 7.5. So it looks like the market's kind of kosher on it right now. I don't know which way this is going to go. I've talked to some sharper people that have this at like 9 points, 8 points, right in the middle. I'm a little bit below 7, so that's why I took it. But maybe this is going to tell us a lot about Sam Hartman, I think, for this year. I will say Dave Duran has played Sam Hartman in the past quite a few times when he was at Wake. So that makes me wonder if he kind of knows a way to stop him or not. That you could argue that both ways for Sam Hartman, though. But a little disagreement on this game, which is great too. We love disagreement sometimes, especially during the season when no one knows exactly what
strong opinions weekly held early in the season.
Exactly, weekly, totally. Well, let's move on to maybe the biggest morning game. Another big morning game because it involves the same team, and you have Nebraska versus Colorado. Colorado is -3. The total is 59. I believe that's where it still is. It's it's so funny that all the texts I got, Parker, and tweets about why if this is only 2 or 3, well, I'm just going to bet my mortgage on Colorado. It's just stuff like that, and I'm like, oh man, that's not what I want to hear because that means it's not going to move for me.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to be I'm fishing for a middle here. I see 1.5. Okay. I expected it to go to 3.5. I don't know if it's still going to go there, but I expected to put the same or more money on Nebraska at 3.5. Okay. I think 3 is probably a very solid market number. The truth is we didn't know where to start Colorado. That is so true. And I moved them probably more than any other team I've ever moved in my power rankings because I had them started really low because I didn't know. I was just listening to sharper people and stuff like that. And but I just figured I have to start them more. But it's funny, I still have them a nudge under Nebraska. And Nebraska, it's not like that they have a bad coach. They have a really good dog coach in Matt Rule, and this was their big rivalry. These teams in the Big 12, Big 8, they used to be rivals forever, right? Colorado and Nebraska. They used to play each other all the time. And I just feel like this could be a little harder than Colorado fans think just because they beat a rebuilding TCU fan. And I know you love your Horned Frogs, my friend. I disliked them ever since I was at the Rose Bowl in 2011, just to let you know, by the way.
Were you physically at the Rose Bowl?
I was physically at the Rose Bowl.
I was there too. That's cool. Yeah.
Oh, you lucky bastard. Probably a real TCU fan because everyone else was just Texas Longhorns fans with TCU hats on that day. But,
well, before the Rose Bowl, it was if you didn't get into Texas, you went to TCU. Changed a little bit after that, but that was how it was for the Rose Bowl. So
okay, well that makes sense. But it's funny. It's like I felt like there was a lot of you guys out there. It was JJ Watt's last game, and of course I think it was Tolzien with that stupid battered pass at the end that just took us out. I was just so disappointed, but hey, congrats to you. It was a long bus ride home back because as a Badger fan, I expected them to win. And I was actually at the Oregon one the year after with Russell Wilson. Now I was not disappointed that we lost that game. It was just a fun game to be at. That was one of the best Rose Bowls that I've had. So I did go to back-to-back Rose Bowls, but anyway, going back to this game, this is a terrible spot, Parker, a terrible spot for Colorado. The amount of emotion spent in beating a completely revamped TCU team was just immense. And you could see through Colorado's defense that they can be definitely scored on. If they have a couple hiccups on offense, you have Nebraska coming off a heartbreaking loss with extra time to prep, with a great coach in Matt Rule, with an experienced quarterback in Sims, you might see a winning team here in Nebraska and completely shock it. But that's why we love college football. It's because of this situation right here. I'm going to be playing back. I'm looking for a middle. If anything, I would have more on the Nebraska side. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I definitely lean Nebraska here. And it's not a vote against Colorado. Love what they're doing. I think great. Something we've never seen. Very interesting. I'm sort of lamenting the first American Athletic Conference coach who cut 60 of his guys trying to do a rebuild and screws the program forever. I remember I think it was 2019, I was at Big 12 Media Days, and David Beatty at Kansas looked me in the eyes and was like, there were 36 guys on the team when I got here, and 6 of them walked out as soon as I opened my mouth. Like, if you get in a roster hole, you're screwed. So good luck trying to do the transfer thing. If you go that big, you got to make sure you hit. And Prime did hit with obviously with Hunter and with Shadur. I think this is a very unsustainable performance from Colorado. Specifically, a couple things. TCU's offensive line very poor, and really could not get a consistent push when Colorado decided to take away the rush. So TCU was averaging 7.7, I think, yards per attempt before they stacked the box and said beat us passing, and TCU couldn't do it. They couldn't keep up there. They threw a couple of interceptions in the red zone that probably would have swung that game. It's raining very loud outside. Sorry, you can hear that on the thing awesome behind me. And then 18 missed tackles by TCU's defense. TCU's defense missing some athletes. Could not get a rush at all. Could not pressure him. On pressured dropbacks for Shadur Sanders, he had a time to throw of 4.18 seconds. He could read a book. He could make a sandwich back there. Nebraska's going to disrupt him. I think the defense is better than TCU's. On the other side of things, I think Nebraska will be able to run 6.3 yards per attempt, 4.3 yards after contact against Minnesota. I expect this to be an equalization game for Colorado a little bit, just because Nebraska is much more balanced than TCU.
Okay, we have agreement on this one, so that's good. Do you think that there's enough play on Colorado to push this up? I don't. I think there's going to be. I think it's going to be a minus 3.5, minus 120. I think it's going to be plus 3.5 on the Nebraska side, minus 120. I think that's the best I'm going to get. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm always a skeptic. I'm always a cynic. But these reports about this is the most betting that's ever been done on this or whatever, the numbers, more than NFL teams, all this stuff. There's not a lot of accountability with that needing to be true. And I think there's probably a lot of nuance with that. So I don't know how much play is actually on this game. I know it's getting a lot of action. A lot of people are, if the comments of the Bet US show today are any indication, people love to bet on Colorado. They're all about it. So I honestly at this point would be surprised if it got to 3.5, but we'll see.
All right. Well, good stuff, man. I cannot wait to watch the game, though. It's going to be a nice early one. So get your coffee ready for this one. All right. Well, hey, let's go a little hodgepodge real quick since we have a couple minutes. Here, I was like, man, Kent State's terrible. Freaking terrible. And Arkansas is laying like 38 against them, right? I am seriously considering betting Arkansas. And it's not like Arkansas is a juggernaut. But I saw a Kent State team that should lose to most FCS teams right now, and they look that bad to me. I just don't see them scoring much against Arkansas. I know Arkansas likes to put on some points when they have the opportunity. This could be one of those situations here. I'm just throwing it out there. Sometimes teams are so bad you can't even power rate them so bad. Kind of like Alabama was for years. It's like, I can't even power rate them high enough because the game's over in the third quarter, right? It's like this almost feels the same way on the opposite, Parker.
Yeah. It's a rough situation. They got just absolutely plundered. And then, good for Sean Lewis, their coach, going out to Colorado and getting his due. He's great. You look at what they put up against John Reese Plumlee running last week, and you think KJ Jefferson's a little bit bigger, a little more physical than John Reese Plumlee. I think that's a really bad 2-game stretch for Kent State. And what I would do is as trying to fade them down the stretch, because they're a team I have circled to fade, that cumulative effect just gets worse and worse. And the will to, score and get that backdoor cover is going to continue to wane, I think, for Kent State.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's just a situation where I don't even think they can backdoor a second string Arkansas team out there,
No, man. It is really, really bad.
Second string will fight and they'll play hard. That's another problem. It's like sometimes you play the other side hoping that they'll put them their third string. Well, sometimes the third string is better than the first string. So that's interesting. App State, North Carolina, this thing dropped to 58 now, this total. It was at 60.5. I'll consider an overplay on this one. This one was electrifying a couple years ago. Was it last year? Maybe it was last year or the year before. I have to look.
Last year. So a ton of overtimes and a close game. A game that for my NC State futures, I had an under last year and was unhappy with. Yeah, I think the question is, I don't know what you did with your power ratings. Did you move South Carolina offense down more, or did you move UNC defense up more after this?
Both.
Yeah,
I did both, really. So that was the important move, I think. You got to look at the fact that and North Carolina's was better on defense, but you can't completely trust that because South Carolina has just a bad tendency to start really bad, and Rattler is just untrustable. Yep. And so I think that App State just has the knack for beating or actually competing with a team like North Carolina and being able to put up the points. And North Carolina's going to put up the points. You can think team total if you want to. I'm not completely against the team total, but you're looking at 40-20. It'd be like 39-21 to get to 60. So 38-20 would be the team total at 18. So you're looking at over 38 points for North Carolina. Yeah. That's the only way I would look on a team total size. Probably, God, they both seem a little small to me. I mean, that's why I'm kind of looking to over 58. So I know Kyle's our totals guy, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that, and certainly I'm much more the team total guy than an overs than an absolute game over. And I like UNC there. It's a way to, it's a way to bet on the over without being accountable for App State just laying an egg or UNC's defense being real. So with uncertainty on both sides of those, I like that. I like that a lot.
Troy getting points against Kansas State is interesting too. Was this the upset last year? Was it Troy that beat them last year? I thought it was beat Kansas State.
Wasn't it Tulane?
Maybe it was. Okay, maybe it was Tulane. I knew it started with a T. one of the good teams from last year that won their conferences, Troy and Tulane. But
Tulane 17-10 was the final score.
Okay, well, Troy, they had a bad showing against Stephen F. Austin, only won 48-30. I guess I didn't watch the game, so I don't know if this was garbage points at the end or nothing, but they sure returned a good amount of production. And last year, I mean, they were fantastic last year, a little bit ugly in their bowl game against UTSA, but the way they beat Coastal Carolina and everything. But I just find this a fascinating game for Kansas State. It's almost like Kansas State's kind of like, well, geez, now we have to play Troy. I got Missouri. I got Missouri on deck, which is at least an SEC team, and Troy's kind of in the way. So, I mean, this is just a situation. I'm getting double digits with Troy, a pretty good one. I don't think my power rankings even line up. Which way would you go on this? I think the spread was 15.5, 16, something like that.
Yeah, I've seen. I think it was 17 and moved a little bit towards Kansas State. I mean, this is the situation they were in last year with Oklahoma and Tulane being right before it, and they kind of turtled up against Tulane and they got stuck. They didn't get the last drive they needed, and they got stuck and they lost it. And in the grand scheme of things, they won the Big 12. They went to the Sugar Bowl. It didn't really change their season very much. They weren't gonna go to the playoff if they hadn't lost to Tulane or whatever. So it didn't really matter overall. But the thing about Troy is that they're one of those teams that, like, the down-to-down business of football wasn't as good. Some of their defense or offensive efficiency stats were really bolstered because their defense was so good at forcing turnovers that they got better field position. They had shorter fields, and so they're scoring more. They lose their defensive coordinator to go do the dance. He's at Tulane now, I believe.
Okay.
And because Tulane had to hire two guys because they hired Lance Guidry from Marshall, and he got hired to Miami, and then Tulane had to hire again. But I think that he is. I expect some regression from that defense, and Kansas State's still kind of figuring out what the offensive mix is now that Deuce Vaughn is gone. And they've got Giddens and they've got Trayshawn Ward. Both of those guys looked really good. Didn't really matter last week. And Will Howard, I think, one of the more experienced quarterbacks in college football. Given the defensive regression I expect out of Troy, I'd actually lean that way. But I'm very compelled by the spot argument, especially because we saw the exact same thing happen last year and they got stuck by Oklahoma. So I can understand the spot argument for sure.
All right. No, great stuff. Spot argument. All right, man. Well, Parker, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on and breaking down some games. I have a blast talking to you. Love my college football, man. And you are one of the go-to guys that I enjoy consuming media and obviously some new sites, Sumer Sports and the CFB graphs. Where can our listeners get your great information and media?
Yeah, Twitter is the best place. That's the hub for everything. You'll find it there. I put the stat previews up there. And then make sure you subscribe on YouTube to the BetUS NCAA F show on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at noon Central. So that's always a fun time with Kyle and Gary Seegers over there. We have a lot of fun at picks and games. So check that out as well.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys check that show out and check out Parker at Stats of War. We'll be texting Parker. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.